I'm in the heartland of the Welsh countryside, trying to learn more about the labour-saving devices of permaculture. One way in which permaculturists save on time and energy is with the practice of zoning.
So you're going to tell me about zoning?
Yes, the concept of zoning is really important in permaculture. And it's about putting your effort in where you really need to. And so if you think that some things need more attention from you more regularly, so for example, the polytunnel and the greenhouse have to be opened every day, the chickens have to be attended to every single day. So it makes sense not to put them a long way away. Whereas if you've got fruit trees, for example, or you've got a woodland that you go to harvest your fuel wood from, you don't need to go there every day. That will be maybe a once a week, once a month type of activity.
So how does the permaculture concept of zoning apply to the kitchen garden?
So in terms of zoning, the kitchen garden here, if you can see, we've got our annual vegetables here, and we've also got some salad crops. And these are relatively close to the house.
Sure.
So it's easy if I'm preparing a meal, and I almost always want fresh vegetables and fresh salads, so I can just nip out of the house, get what I need and go back into the house. Now, I wouldn't want to do that if it was hundreds of metres away.
The concept of zoning can be applied to everything, from organising your kitchen to the running of settlements. In a community, it makes sense to put in one place the things that bring people together. Places they may need to go to every day, like schools, shopping centres, health centres. But usually in our culture, these facilities are fragmented and put in different places. To a permaculturist, this does not make sense. Another principle of permaculture relates to the placement of things in relation with each other.
Permaculture is about trying to nurture beneficial relationships, just as in nature. Things are not operating in isolation. So by placing things that work well together, close together, we can help that to happen. Now, an example here would be, one is we have a little pond, because having a pond here means that we can encourage frogs right in the middle of the vegetable garden. And by encouraging frogs, they eat slugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another good example of encouraging beneficial relations would be the placement of a chicken coop next to a greenhouse. And how does that work, I hear you ask? Well, at night, the body heat of the chickens helps to mitigate the cold temperature in the greenhouse. So simple.
So have I showed you my permaculture chickens?
Not yet.
Ah, here they are. Come on, girls. Come on, chicks. Before we had the chickens, we actually had something called gooseberry sawfly, which is a caterpillar that can completely defoliate fruit bushes. But what happens with the little caterpillars is that they pupate in the soil. So once we got the chickens and the chickens scratch around, we had no gooseberry sawfly after that at all, which means, well, we wouldn't use chemicals anyway, but we weren't even tempted to use chemicals to try and control the pest, which is what most people would actually do, wouldn't they? They go and use chemicals. Here we've got a biological control, which also gives us the benefit of eggs, gives us some pleasure as well, and is happy in the garden finding its own food. Another thing about permaculture is if you're going to have animals in the system, it tries to work with those animals' natural behaviours, because one, that's good welfare for the animal, for them to be able to behave naturally, and two, by allowing that to happen, we can see how their natural behaviour might benefit our system.
Now it's time to move beyond the garden, to another zone, towards Angie's orchard. Further away because it doesn't need tending to every day. And here I learn more about a very important concept in permaculture, the forest garden.
Have you noticed all the plants growing underneath the apples?
I had, yeah. Weeds.
No. This is the concept of forest gardening. In the forest, you have different layers and you have different things growing together. Whereas if you go to a commercial orchard, well, they'll certainly be spraying the trees and they'll be herbiciding the grass and stuff underneath. And that's just so that they can produce a certain type of apple with a certain speed and that they want to harvest them mechanically. In the permaculture system, what we're trying to do is we don't see just the apples as a yield. So underneath these apple trees, we're growing flowers, we're growing herbs. I'm growing food crops for my chickens. So it means that we're not just depending on the apple crop. We're actually getting all of the other things which are analogues. They're not the same as a natural woodland, but we're using the model of a natural woodland to inform our design.
Okay.
I don't think I could have found a better guide than Angie. She's helped me to understand difficult concepts in such a simple way. Simplicity, I'm beginning to feel, is so charmingly an essential part of permaculture.
So this here is a hay meadow. There's an important concept in permaculture, which is linked to the zoning really, is that although all of the system is aimed to be environmentally friendly, having space just for wildlife is important. So I suppose what you could say is that this is like a dedicated wildlife zone, and we've got a hay meadow in front of us which will support an awful lot of different wildlife as well as a great variety of plant species, many more than in a farmed field. And then over here we planted a wood for the millennium, so this was planted in 2000, and it's a wood that is largely native species.
Okay.
And so this wood, although in the future it might meet some of our own timber needs, it's designed to attract wildlife. It's also located where a lot of the wind comes from, so as it grows up it will help to protect the property more widely from the wind.
Sure.
In an old wood, they reckon that about 25% of the wood is dead and rotting, in accordance with the natural cycle. Permaculturists have a way of simulating this natural cycle in a newly planted wood, while the trees are still young.
Have you noticed the piles of logs?
Yeah.
These are what we call habitat piles. They'll gradually break down, and in fact you get a lot of invertebrates, small animals living in them, and that in turn will attract wrens, it will attract woodpeckers.
This is wonderful, this fence you've got here. It's like a living fence, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is, and I'm in the middle. This is not finished.
Angie is not a professional willow weaver, but it gives her great pleasure to do things for herself. Being a generalist, able to do a little bit of everything, is part of the permaculturist's approach to life. It is tied up with the principle of self-sufficiency.
Let me just explain a little bit of permaculture, but in this fence. It's not just a fence, it's a habitat for wildlife, it's a resource for my materials to make things, it's a shelter from the wind. It's, in my opinion, a piece of beauty. It's enabled me to develop some skills in willow weaving. If I really wanted to, I could harvest salicylic acid from the willow if I wanted a painkiller. There's just so many things, and I can use it for art and craft. I've even used it down in the school, in the little school in the village, and the children there have started to learn to weave willow and made a dome where they can hide inside and tell stories.
And make pretend.
Yeah. Now tell me a fence that you can get from the builder's merchant that can do all of those things. The important thing about any permaculture design I would add is that it's a fluid thing. So with the best will in the world, you can create a design based on where you are now and the observations that you make. But time will give you more information. And so it's very important to be alert and to observe what's happening within your design and make changes if necessary.
So like life, the process of permaculture is a journey, and it's not a journey that you can start with all the knowledge on. You have to learn slowly, and also be flexible to change, to see, oh, this worked here, that didn't work there, and be flexible to move it around. So almost like a hollow bamboo blowing in the wind, moving one way and moving back the other way as times and seasons change. Permaculture's a way of working in harmony with our planet to create a sustainable environment that supports us while we also nurture it, rather than coming in with arrogance, if you will, thinking that the world and all its resources are just something to be mined for our use, which we can just take away and that the earth doesn't need.